The alarm didn't ring, because someone else already knew my daughter's schedule. At 6:45 a.m., my 7-year-old was supposed to walk to the bus stop. That morning, I realized the routine I built to keep her safe had become the target Michael canceled at 5 seconds before the electronic scream could fracture the suburban quiet. Habit. Muscle memory from a life that required him to wake first, move quietly, and exist without friction. In the pre-dawn stillness of the 2-bedroom ranch house, the only sound that mattered was the slow, even breathing coming from the small room down the hall. He rose from the thin mattress, ignoring the spring's tired protest. The clock read 4:30 a.m., time for the first mask of the day. The kitchen linoleum was cold beneath his bare feet. He moved through the routine with reverence. Coffee measured precisely, water judged by instinct alone. He didn't drink it for energy. He drank it for clarity, the kind required to survive the civilian world, a place that still felt underwater, sounds dulled and movements slow. Here, he was Michael Vance, 38, single father, certified registered nurse anesthetist at St. Jude's Medical Center. A respectable life. A quiet one, carefully constructed. At 5 a.m., the kitchen light flicked on. A small figure stood in the doorway, hair the color of wet sand, eyes already alert despite sleep tugging at their edges. "Daddy?" His shoulders softened instantly. "Morning, sunshine." Audrey shuffled toward the island, clutching a plastic dinosaur she used as a bookmark. 7 years old. Too observant. Too quiet. Her eyes, storm cloud gray, missed nothing. "Did you make the good toast?" she asked. "The very best," he said, already reaching for the bread. This was the burden he never spoke of, the constant, silent vigilance of making sure this child felt safe in a world he knew was not. By day, he managed airways and pain, guiding patients through the edge of unconsciousness. By night, he fought memories of field surgeries done under headlamps, hands shaking not from fear, but cold. He packed her lunch, turkey triangles, carrots, apple juice, and slipped a folded napkin inside. "Be brave today, my beautiful girl. Love, Dad." "Why do you always write that?" Audrey asked. "Because bravery isn't loud," he said gently, "and sometimes it needs reminding." By 6:15, he dropped her at Mrs. Thompson's house, kissed her forehead, and drove across town. The moment he stepped onto the polished floors of St. Jude's, the shift was automatic. Michael Vance, father, disappeared. Mike Vance, CRNA, took his place. Quiet, efficient, invisible. "Morning, Mike," Brenda called from the desk, already overwhelmed. "We're slammed." He nodded and moved on. In scrubs slightly too loose across the shoulders, he checked the trauma bay equipment. His hands were steady, exact. People noticed that. They also noticed he didn't talk about his past. "Military," was all he ever said. Dr. Chen stopped him near a monitor. "That splint you did earlier, overkill. Effective, but intense." "The X-ray showed vascular compromise," Michael replied calmly. Chen waved him off. "You're good, Mike. Just relax. This isn't a battlefield." Michael didn't correct him. He never did. Titles didn't matter. Anonymity did. "They think you're intense," the old voice whispered. "They've never seen intensity." The scar on his left hand caught the light, a souvenir from the Persian Gulf. He had left that life 6 years ago, after it cost him his marriage and nearly his sanity. He was checking a defibrillator when his phone, locked deep in his locker, vibrated with a tone he hadn't heard in years. Encrypted, silent, intentional. Michael stepped into the break room and retrieved it. One line of code. Coordinates. No decryption needed. Tango Charlie. 937. Eyes only. Immediate extraction required. Appalachian wilderness. Hundreds of miles away. The past hadn't circled back. It had landed. Michael locked the phone away and returned to the floor. The exhaustion vanished, replaced by razor clarity. When a nurse fumbled an arterial bleed, he moved without hesitation. "Pressure. Now. Trauma kit." The room shifted. Heads turned. Michael Vance wasn't just treating a patient anymore. He was managing the environment. And as he worked, one thought anchored him to the present, fierce and immovable. Whatever they wanted from the man he used to be, they were going to have to go through a father first. "Dad." Audrey didn't finish the word. She stood in the doorway, small and still, framed by the soft blue-gray of early dawn. Her hair was mussed from sleep, her face calm in a way that unsettled adults. Her eyes, those storm cloud eyes, were already awake. Michael shifted instantly. The ghost receded. The father stepped forward. "Hey, sunshine," he said softly, kneeling to her height. He brushed the back of his hand across her forehead. Cool, safe. "Bad dream?" She nodded once. "The shadows were loud." The phrase landed hard. Michael straightened slowly. Audrey had never been taught that phrase. Not explicitly. It had slipped through anyway, the way trauma always did, through tone, silence, posture, inherited, not learned. She stepped into the kitchen, carrying her book, Where the Wild Things Are, held tight against her chest. No stuffed animal. Audrey carried objects like anchors. The coffee machine hissed to life, but Michael didn't hear it. The words echoed instead, pulling him backward. He wasn't in the kitchen anymore. He was standing in a hospital corridor 5 years ago, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the air thick with antiseptic and panic. Lily's world. Lily had been Nurse Bennett then, quiet, overlooked, mocked, until she wasn't. He saw it again, heard it again. The moment the construction worker collapsed, the chaos, the resident yelling, the monitors screaming, and Lily standing there, eyes cold and precise. "Tension pneumothorax," she'd said calmly. "If you move him, he dies." "You're a nurse," the resident shouted. "You don't diagnose." Then the crash, the blood pressure dropping, and Lily, Valkyrie, stepped forward. Michael had listened to the audio later, the sound of trapped air releasing when she decompressed the chest, the room going silent, life returning. She saved him. That was when the doors blew open. DevGru operators flooding the ER, weapons low, voices sharp. "Where is Valkyrie?" Lily standing there, stripped bare by recognition. "I'm not her anymore." Breaker's reply still haunted him. "There is no out for people like us." Then Tex, the Black Hawk. The unexploded ordnance lodged near his spine, Lily demanding titanium tools. The entire hospital frozen in terror as she operated on a live weapon embedded in a human body. Michael remembered the silence after, the round thrown into the empty lot, the distant thump, and Lily, blood-soaked, standing in the hallway holding a satellite phone. "I won't deploy," she told the Admiral, "but I'll teach." She chose to build shields instead of wield swords. Coronado had been their last good year. Then the crash, the malfunction, the call that ended everything. "Daddy?" Michael blinked. The kitchen returned. Audrey was watching him closely. "Did you hear sirens?" she asked. "No," he said, forcing a smile. "Just the wind." He turned to prepare her breakfast. Oatmeal, honey, 3 blueberries. Routine was armor. "Why are your eyes wet?" she asked. He wiped his cheek, surprised. "Just tired." She stirred the oatmeal with solemn focus. "I'll keep the shadows quiet." The words cut deeper than fear ever could. At 5:30 a.m., he finished his coffee. He hugged her longer than usual. "Be good for Mrs. Thompson." "Be safe, Daddy." The word safe felt fragile. He drove to work under a pale sky, the scar on his shoulder aching faintly. St. Jude's waited, predictable and sterile, a perfect hiding place. But the memory of Lily clung to him like smoke. And deep beneath the spare tire in his trunk, sealed and waiting, were things that had never belonged to a civilian life. The shadows weren't just loud for Audrey anymore. They were waking up for him, too. The kitchen was quiet again. Not the peaceful kind, just the absence of noise. The kind that let unwanted thoughts echo too clearly. Michael watched Audrey at the table, legs swinging slightly as she read. 20 minutes of silent reading. Same book, same chair, same time. Routine was the wall he had built brick by brick, not to keep danger out, but to keep her childhood intact. He checked the clock. 6:12 a.m. In 3 minutes, the handover would be complete. Father to professional, protector to provider. Michael Vance, CRNA. He zipped his black work bag, the familiar weight grounding him. Inside, scrubs, stethoscope, anesthesia texts. Nothing that belonged to the other life. That life stayed buried, in theory. He knelt beside Audrey. "Bus stop, Mrs. Thompson's until I'm back," he said gently. 2 texts. She nodded without looking up. "I know the protocol." The word protocol landed heavier than it should have. He kissed the top of her head and left. St. Jude's Medical Center absorbed him immediately. The fluorescent lights, the smell of disinfectant, the low hum of controlled urgency. Michael moved through the halls with practiced ease, slipping into the rhythm of induction times, vitals, dosages. Here, the chaos was predictable, managed. At 11:30 a.m., during a brief lull, his phone vibrated in the locker, not encrypted. Civilian. He almost ignored it. The email subject line was neutral to the point of cruelty. Enrollment and Strategic Planning. Fall Session. Northwood Center for Child Development. Michael leaned against the cold metal door as he read. The language was clinical, careful, polite, elevated stress markers, hypervigilance. Generalized anxiety during unstructured interaction. The word that broke him came next, trauma. He closed his eyes. Audrey hadn't seen anything. Not the war, not the hospital nights, not the helicopters. But trauma didn't need images. It lived in tone, in silence, in the way a parent held their breath too often. He scrolled. The recommendation was clear. A specialized cognitive behavioral program. Intensive, targeted, necessary. The cost sat at the bottom of the page like a verdict. $38,000 annually. His insurance would cover $8. $30,000 short. Michael didn't panic. Panic was inefficient. His mind did what it had always done, ran numbers, mortgage, utilities, school fees, emergency fund, $12,000 in reserve. Burning that would leave them exposed. Extra shifts were possible. But extra shifts meant absence, and absence was the very thing carving the hollow spaces in Audrey's chest. He stared at the screen until the words blurred. Waiting wasn't an option. That night, after dinner and homework and a carefully neutral bedtime story, Michael waited until the house settled into deep sleep. 9:32 p.m. He moved to the utility closet, shifted the washing machine, and opened the false panel behind it. The Pelican case waited exactly where he had left it. Inside, a forged passport, a satellite phone, and a sealed envelope marked simply, "The Curator." Michael sat on the floor, the case between his knees. He had sworn this off, promised Lily. But promises didn't cover tuition. He broke the seal. Coordinates, a timestamp, a retrieval job, small footprint, high risk, payment $50,000. Net, enough. More than enough. Michael exhaled slowly. He wasn't thinking about danger. He was thinking about Audrey sitting in a circle of children, learning how not to scan the room for exits, learning how to be 7. He picked up the satellite phone, its weight familiar and unwelcome. Down the hall, Audrey breathed softly, unaware of the line her father was standing on. Michael closed his eyes. The routine had failed, and when routine failed, the old instincts woke up. He powered on the phone. The street was too quiet. Not peaceful. Prepared. Michael locked the front door behind him, the sound of the deadbolt sliding home too loud in the brittle dawn. His black work bag hung from one shoulder, its weight familiar, deceptive. To anyone watching, he was just another early commuter stepping into a cold suburban morning. To Michael, the air felt staged. "Stay inside until 6:40, he'd told Audrey. No sooner. She had nodded, always did. The sky was a thin, sickly blue, the kind that made shadows stretch longer than they should. He walked toward the driveway, eyes low, peripheral vision wide, cataloging details automatically, recycling bins upright, dew undisturbed on the lawn, no unfamiliar tire tracks. Routine sweep, baseline intact. Then he saw it. The mailbox flag, metal, faded red, had something tucked beneath it. Michael stopped mid-step. Not trash, not wind-blown debris. It was folded paper, secured with a narrow strip of black electrical tape, positioned with intent so it could only be seen by someone walking up the driveway at this exact angle. Him. His pulse didn't spike. It dropped. The sudden calm was worse. He set his work bag down slowly on the asphalt and slid on nitrile gloves from his coat pocket. Movement smooth, unhurried. Panic made noise. Noise invited mistakes. He approached the mailbox like it might bite. The paper was stiff, heavy stock, handwritten, dark, waterproof ink. 7 words. The routine is predictable. The clock runs out at 6:45. Michael didn't look at his watch. He didn't need to. 6:45 was when Audrey was scheduled to step out the front door. 70 feet to the corner, a bright yellow bus, an open street. This wasn't a threat. It was proof of access. They knew the schedule. They knew the child. And they wanted him to know they knew. Michael crushed the note in his gloved fist and pocketed it. He didn't scan the street for movement. Whoever placed it was gone. This had been done hours ago, under cover of night, with the confidence of people who believed time was on their side. Inside the house, the clock ticked. 6:41. Michael turned and moved back toward the front door, not running, not rushing. Speed would tell them he'd seen it. He entered the house quietly. Audrey was in the living room, backpack at her feet, jacket half zipped. She looked up the moment he stepped inside, her eyes sharpened. "Daddy?" Not a question. A red. Michael crossed the room in 3 strides. "New plan," he said, voice low and firm. "The bus is canceled." She didn't argue. She didn't ask why. She reached for her backpack. "Leave it," he said. "Code only." That got a flicker of surprise, but she obeyed. Michael grabbed his keys, wallet, phone. His hand hovered for half a second over the counter where the house phone sat. He ignored it. He dialed St. Jude's as he ushered Audrey toward the back door. "This is Michael Vance," he said the moment someone answered. "Family emergency, sudden onset. I'm unavailable today." The charge nurse protested. "Coverage, the fracture case." "Non-negotiable," Michael replied, voice flat. "Document it." He hung up. The job was secondary now. He scooped Audrey up, her arms instinctively wrapping around his neck. "Where are we going?" she whispered. "To find the quiet," he said. That was all she needed. They exited through the back, cutting across the dew-soaked lawn toward the detached garage. Michael opened the Tacoma and set her into the passenger seat, buckling her in with practiced efficiency. As he rounded the hood, he glanced once, just once, back at the mailbox. The note was gone. The street looked unchanged, innocent. Normal, which meant it was compromised. Michael started the engine. The clock hit 6:45. Somewhere nearby, someone would be watching the corner where a little girl was supposed to stand, but she wouldn't be there. Michael pulled out onto the road, taking the long way, back roads first, mirrors alive with reflection and threat. The routine had kept them safe, until it became the target. And now, the father was awake. Michael didn't head for the highway. That would have been expected. Instead, he took 3 turns in quick succession, cutting through streets designed to confuse delivery drivers and lose anyone unfamiliar with the neighborhood's logic. The Tacoma moved at an unremarkable speed, signals clean, stops complete. From the outside, nothing about the drive suggested urgency. Inside, every sense was live. Audrey sat silently in the passenger seat, hands folded in her lap. She didn't look out the window. She didn't fidget. She knew better than to draw attention when silence was required. "Seatbelt tight?" Michael asked. She tugged it once. "Yes." "Good." He checked the rearview mirror. A sedan 2 cars back. Blue. Ordinary. It stayed when he turned. Stayed again at the next light. Michael filed the detail away without reacting. He pulled into a grocery store parking lot, early, mostly empty, and parked near the cart return. He cut the engine and waited. 10 seconds. 20. The blue sedan rolled past the entrance without slowing, not tailing, or smart enough not to. Michael restarted the truck and pulled out, heart rate steady. The decision crystallized. They weren't moving yet. They were watching, which meant he still had leverage. He drove toward the river road, the long way back toward town, toward visibility, toward places with cameras, witnesses, and ambient noise. Predators preferred quiet. He would deny them that. Audrey finally spoke. "Are we going to Mrs. Thompson's?" "No," he said gently. "Change of plan." She nodded once, absorbing it. They stopped at a gas station just after 7. Michael parked under a camera with a clear line of sight to the pumps and store entrance. He didn't get out immediately. He scanned reflections in the glass, angles, shadows, nothing obvious. He opened his door and stepped out, keeping his body between Audrey and the open space. He didn't leave her alone. Inside the store, he bought coffee, a bottle of water, and a cheap phone charger. Normal purchases. Traceable. Civilian. At the counter, the clerk barely looked up. Good. Back in the truck, Michael didn't pull away right away. He opened his work bag and reached past the scrubs, past the stethoscope. He didn't touch the gun. Instead, he took out the burner phone. It powered on silently. One contact. He stared at the name for a full 3 seconds before pressing call. The line connected with no ring. "You're early," the voice said. "You're late," Michael replied. A pause. "You saw the marker." "I saw the message," Michael said, "which means you've crossed a line." "You're still on our board, Vance." "No," Michael corrected calmly. "I'm on my own." Another pause, longer this time. "You took the job." "I opened the envelope," Michael said. "That's not the same thing. You need the money." Michael looked at Audrey through the reflection in the windshield. She was watching the store, not him. "Yes," he said. "I do." "Then you understand the cost." "I understand leverage," Michael replied. "And you just showed yours too early." The voice hardened. "Careful." Michael leaned back in his seat. "You left a note threatening a child's schedule. That wasn't strategic. That was emotional, which means someone on your side is impatient." Silence. "That makes you sloppy," Michael continued. "And sloppy people make mistakes." "You're not untouchable." "No," Michael said softly, "but I'm not alone." He ended the call and removed the battery. Audrey turned toward him. "Are they gone?" "Not yet." "Are they loud?" Michael considered that. "Not if we keep moving smart." She nodded, satisfied. He drove them to a public library next. Large, open, staffed, predictable. He walked Audrey inside, signed her in for a children's reading hour she'd attended before, and sat where he could see every entrance. He didn't relax. He planned. They had shown him the threat. He had shown them restraint. The next move mattered. By late morning, the city felt different. Not dangerous, just aware. Michael could feel the perimeter tightening, the way a storm changes pressure before clouds appear. He checked his watch. They had wanted him to run. He hadn't. They had wanted panic. He had given them control, which meant the balance was shifting. Michael Vance, CRNA, sat in a public library with his daughter 10 feet away, reading quietly with other children. And somewhere out there, someone was realizing they had underestimated a father who had already lost everything once and would not do it again. Michael felt it before he saw it. The air inside the library had shifted, subtly but unmistakably. Not louder, tighter. The kind of pressure change that had nothing to do with weather and everything to do with intent. He closed the book he wasn't really reading and lifted his gaze, letting it drift, not to faces but to reflections. Glass doors, polished floors, the chrome edge of a brochure stand. There, a man near the entrance, late 30s, early 40s, neutral jacket, neutral posture, too neutral. He wasn't browsing, he wasn't waiting, he was holding space. Michael didn't move. Audrey sat cross-legged on the carpet 10 feet away, listening to the librarian read aloud. She looked relaxed. She wasn't scanning. That mattered. Whatever this was, it hadn't reached her yet. Michael checked his watch. 11:18 a.m. He counted breaths, counted seconds. The man shifted his weight, looked at his phone, looked up again, not at Audrey, not at Michael, but at the emergency exit map mounted on the wall. Confirmation. Michael stood. He moved casually, crossing to the water fountain, placing himself between the man and the children's section. He bent to drink, eyes down, tracking movement through reflection. Another figure entered behind the first. Female, hair tied back, athletic build, too alert for a library. Two. They weren't grabbing, not yet. They were verifying. Michael's phone vibrated once in his pocket. Burner. He didn't answer. He walked back to Audrey and knelt. "Hey," he murmured, voice light. "How about we head out early and get lunch?" She looked up, searching his face. She didn't ask why. "Okay?" No hesitation. Good. They walked toward the exit together. Michael kept his pace even, his hand resting lightly on Audrey's shoulder. Not guiding, not gripping. Just present. As they passed the man, Michael met his eyes briefly. The man looked away first. Outside, sunlight hit hard. Michael didn't head for the truck immediately. He crossed the street, entered a cafe with outdoor seating, and chose a table squarely in view of traffic and cameras. He ordered grilled cheese for Audrey, coffee for himself. Normal, public, observable. He sat with his back to the wall. The burner vibrated again. This time, he answered. "You're visible," the voice said. "So are you," Michael replied calmly. "You're escalating." "No," Michael said. "You are." A pause. Wind noise. Movement. "You didn't take the job," the voice said. "I didn't decline it either." Another pause. "You're forcing our hand." Michael watched Audrey peel her sandwich carefully, methodical as always. "You already forced mine," he said, "when you mentioned a clock." Silence stretched. "You want control," Michael continued. "Then here's the boundary. You do not approach my daughter. You do not track her. You do not reference her routine again. And if we don't agree," Michael leaned back in his chair, gaze steady. "Then I stop being discreet." The line went dead. Michael removed the battery. Audrey looked up. "Are they gone now?" "Not yet," he said honestly. "But they're thinking." She nodded, accepting that. They finished lunch. Michael paid in cash. Back in the Tacoma, he didn't drive home. Instead, he headed towards St. Jude's Medical Center. Visibility again. If they wanted to watch, he would give them a stage crowded with witnesses, cameras, and professionals trained to notice anomalies. He parked in the main garage and took Audrey inside, signing her in at the volunteer services desk as a visitor. Familiar faces, familiar smells, controlled chaos. "This is my work," he told her. She looked around. "It smells like clean and worry." He almost smiled. He sat her in a staff lounge with coloring pencils and a sandwich. He stayed within arm's reach. And then, finally, his phone buzzed again. This time encrypted. A message. "Stand down." Observation terminated. No further action planned. Michael read it twice. He didn't trust it, but he accepted it. For now. He powered the phone off and slid it deep into his bag. Audrey leaned against his side, small and solid. "Are the shadows quiet?" "For the moment," he said. She rested her head on his arm. "Tell me if they get loud again." "I will." Michael looked out across the hospital floor, the rhythm of stretchers and staff moving like blood through veins. They had tested him. He had not broken. And somewhere, someone was recalculating the cost of continuing. This wasn't over, but it wasn't theirs anymore. The silence afterward was the hardest part. Not the clean, earned quiet of safety, but the fragile stillness that followed a near miss. The kind that asked questions without sound. Michael drove them home just before dusk, the sky washed pale, the world pretending nothing unusual had happened. He took the long way again, looping through familiar streets, letting the repetition reassert control. No tails, no parked cars out of place, no second looks. On the surface, the perimeter had held. Inside the house, the air felt unchanged. Shoes by the door, backpack hook empty, the smell of detergent and old coffee. Michael locked the door, then checked it again, not because he thought it would fail, but because he needed the ritual. Audrey set her coat down neatly. Too neatly. "Homework?" she asked. "Tomorrow," Michael said. "Tonight we rest." She nodded and went to wash her hands, scrubbing longer than necessary. He watched the muscles in her shoulders tighten and release, tighten and release. The body remembered even when the mind tried not to. Dinner was simple: pasta, butter, salt. They ate at the table, the overhead light too bright, casting sharp shadows on the walls. Michael dimmed it without comment. Halfway through, Audrey spoke. "If I hadn't gone to the bus today, would they still have come?" Michael didn't answer right away. He chose honesty, but the careful kind. "They didn't come because of you," he said. "They came because of me." She processed that quietly. "So, if I'm quiet, it helps?" The question landed like a blade. "No," Michael said immediately, too fast. He softened his voice. "Being quiet doesn't keep you safe. Being a kid does." She twirled her fork once. "Loud shadows don't like kids." Michael reached across the table and covered her hand. They don't get to choose who you are. She looked at him, searching. They choose when they come. Not anymore, he said. Later, during story time, she picked Where the Wild Things Are again. Michael read slowly, letting the rhythm do its work. When Max sailed back home, when supper was waiting, Audrey's breathing finally deepened. But even asleep, her brow stayed faintly furrowed. Michael sat on the edge of the bed long after the book closed. He listened to her breathe, counted, measured. He knew this stillness was temporary. Not because danger was imminent, but because the cost had already been paid. Children didn't forget pressure. They absorbed it. In the kitchen, Michael cleaned methodically. Dishes washed, counters wiped, coffee set for 4:30 a.m. The routine reassembled itself like armor, dented, but intact. He opened his laptop at the table. The email from Northwood Center for Child Development was still open. The numbers hadn't changed. $30,000. He didn't think about the job. Not yet. He thought about the way Audrey had scrubbed her hands, about the question she hadn't asked. How long does this last? Michael closed the laptop. That night he dreamed, not of war, not of helicopters, but of waiting rooms, endless rows of plastic chairs, Audrey sitting alone, backpack on her knees, scanning doors that never opened. He woke before the alarm. 4:28 a.m. He lay still, letting the house breathe around him. Nothing moved, nothing watched. But the knowledge remained. Even if the threat receded, the vigilance stayed. The shadows didn't need to be loud to exist. At breakfast, Audrey ate her toast quietly. "Bus today?" she asked. "Yes," Michael said. Same time. She studied his face. "Routine?" "Yes." She nodded. Relief flickered, then something else. Doubt. At 6:40, she put on her jacket and stood by the door. Michael knelt and zipped it for her. His hands were steady. "Remember," he said gently, "you're allowed to laugh. You're allowed to be messy. You're allowed to be 7. She considered that, then smiled. Small, but real. "I'll try." He watched her walk to the corner. The bus came. Doors opened, closed. The yellow disappeared down the street. Michael stayed where he was until it was gone. The line had held. But holding a line was not the same as winning. As he turned back into the house, Michael understood something with painful clarity. Protection wasn't just about stopping threats. It was about making sure the people you loved didn't become part of the defense system. And that was a battle he hadn't trained for. The waiting room smelled like citrus cleaner and patience. Michael sat with his hands folded, watching Audrey trace the pattern of dots on the carpet with the toe of her shoe. Northwood Center for Child Development was quiet in a deliberate way. Soft walls, rounded corners, furniture designed to absorb impact instead of echo it. This place specialized in things that didn't leave bruises. A woman opened the door and smiled gently. "Audrey, Dr. Kaplan is ready for you." Audrey looked at Michael. He nodded. "I'll be right here." She stood, squared her shoulders, and followed the woman down the hallway without looking back. Michael exhaled only after the door closed. He hated this part, the waiting, the forced stillness. It reminded him too much of field hospitals where you waited to find out if someone would wake up or never would. Dr. Kaplan returned 45 minutes later. "She's remarkably composed," she said, sitting across from him. "But that composure is expensive." Michael didn't interrupt. "She exhibits advanced situational awareness for her age," Kaplan continued. "She reads rooms, anticipates emotional shifts. That's not inherently bad, but it suggests she's learned that safety depends on vigilance." Michael stared at the framed watercolor on the wall. "She's observant." "She's guarding," Kaplan corrected gently. "Children shouldn't feel responsible for maintaining equilibrium." Michael nodded once. He had built the routine to protect her. Somewhere along the way, she had learned to protect him. "She mentioned loud shadows," Kaplan added. Michael's jaw tightened. "I didn't ask her to explain," Kaplan said quickly. "I didn't need to. It's a metaphor children use when they sense threat without language for it. What matters is that she believes quiet is something she must actively maintain." Michael leaned forward. "Can you help her?" "Yes," Kaplan said, "but only if the environment supports the work." Michael understood the implication. At home that evening, Audrey was quieter than usual. Not withdrawn, just careful. They cooked together. She measured ingredients precisely, wiped spills immediately. "You don't have to be perfect," Michael said lightly. "I know," she replied, "but it helps." After dinner, she sat on the couch, knees pulled up, watching nothing in particular. "Dad?" she asked. "Yes." "If I stop watching, will you be okay?" The question hollowed him out. He crossed the room and sat beside her. "You were never supposed to watch," he said softly. "That was my job." She nodded, accepting the answer but not fully convinced. That night, Michael sat alone at the kitchen table, the therapy paperwork spread out before him. Timelines, costs, language stripped of emotion. $30,000. He closed the folder. The Pelican case waited in the utility closet, silent and patient. At 4:30 a.m., the coffee brewed. The routine moved forward. But something fundamental had shifted. Michael watched Audrey eat her toast, crumbs dotting the table. He didn't clean them right away. Progress, he told himself, wasn't always neat. At the bus stop, she hugged him tighter than usual. "I'll try not to listen for the shadows," she said. "Don't try," he replied. "Just be." She smiled and ran for the bus when it came. Ran, not walked. Michael stayed until it disappeared. He drove to work afterward, back into the controlled chaos of St. Jude's. He performed flawlessly. He always did. But beneath the precision, a decision was forming. The therapy would help, but only if he removed the source of the pressure. Only if he found a way to fund healing without inviting the past back into their lives. By evening, Michael stood in the utility closet again, hand resting on the false panel. He didn't open it. Not yet. He walked back into the kitchen and set the coffee maker for morning. Tomorrow, the routine would continue. But routines could evolve. And for the first time since the shadows had whispered his name, Michael allowed himself to consider that protection might require not disappearance, but transformation. The house slept. That was the first thing Michael confirmed, not by sight, but by sound. The subtle creak of settling wood, the distant hum of the refrigerator, and beneath it all, the soft, steady rhythm of Audrey's breathing down the hall. He stood in the utility closet, the false panel already open. The Pelican case waited on the concrete floor like it always had, neutral, patient. It had never demanded anything from him. It simply existed, holding a life he had buried with care and intent. Michael knelt and opened it. The contents hadn't changed. The forged passport, the satellite phone, the envelope marked "The Curator." He didn't touch the phone. He picked up the envelope again, feeling the thin paper flecks between his fingers. The job inside was clean, efficient, and perfectly wrong. $50,000 would erase the therapy problem entirely. It would buy Audrey time, space, quiet. And it would buy him back into a world that never let go gently. Michael closed his eyes. He saw Audrey at the table, scrubbing her hands too long. Saw the way she watched doors, the way she asked if he would be okay. The cost of the money wasn't danger, it was inheritance. He folded the paper and set it back in the case. Then he did something he hadn't planned. He took out his phone, his real one, and opened the email from Northwood again. He read past the numbers, past the clinical language, until he found the sentence he had skipped before. Progress depends on reducing environmental threat perception. Environmental. Not imagined. Not internal. Real. Michael closed the email and stood. He walked down the hall and stopped at Audrey's door. He didn't go in. He just rested his palm against the wood, grounding himself in the thin barrier between the present and the future. "I won't teach you to survive," he whispered. "I'll teach you to live." Back in the kitchen, he sat at the table and opened his laptop. He didn't search for jobs or contracts. He searched for one name. The Curator, not the envelope. The man. There were no public records, no profiles. But Michael knew where to look. He knew how to read absence like language. It took 20 minutes, one server hop too slow, one payment trail that assumed no one would care. Michael leaned back in his chair. He didn't need to take the job. He needed to end the invitation. At 2:17 a.m., he powered on the satellite phone. It connected immediately. "You've been quiet," the voice said. "I made my decision," Michael replied. "And?" "I'm not taking the contract." A pause. "Not surprised. Assessing." "You need the money." "I need control," Michael said. "And you crossed a line." "You don't get to set—" "I do," Michael cut in, voice calm. "Because I know where you move funds through Bratislava. I know which shell company paid for the note at my mailbox, and I know which name you don't use anymore." Silence. "I don't want exposure," Michael continued. "I want distance. You erase my daughter from every list, every model, every contingency. You never contact me again. You're threatening—" "I'm offering closure," Michael said. "You walk away, clean, no mess, no leverage." The line stayed quiet. Finally, "You're choosing a smaller life." Michael looked toward the hallway, toward the room where a 7-year-old slept, dreaming of things that didn't involve exits or shadows. "No," he said. "I'm choosing a better one." The call ended. Michael removed the battery and returned the phone to the case. He closed it, slid it back into the crawl space, and sealed the panel. Then he went to bed. Morning came the same way it always did. 4:30 a.m. Coffee, toast. Audrey padded into the kitchen, hair tangled, eyes clearer than they had been in days. "Bad dreams?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, it was quiet." He smiled. At the bus stop, she didn't scan the street. She talked about a drawing she wanted to finish. The bus came. She waved. Michael waved back. For the first time since the shadows had spoken, the routine didn't feel like a defense. It felt like a life. The morning arrived without ceremony. No alarms, no omens. Just the soft gray of dawn easing through the kitchen window, laying itself gently across the table Michael had scrubbed clean the night before. The coffee brewed at 4:30 a.m., as it always did, toast browned evenly, butter melted, routine. But this time it didn't feel like armor. Audrey appeared in the doorway a few minutes later, rubbing one eye, hair tangled beyond negotiation. She padded into the kitchen and climbed onto the stool without being asked. "Did you sleep?" Michael asked. "Yes," she said. After a pause, she added, "All the way?" He nodded, accepting that gift without comment. They ate together. Crumbs fell. Michael didn't immediately wipe them away. At 6:40, Audrey put on her jacket. She checked the zipper herself. "Bus day," she said. "Yes." She hesitated at the door, then turned back. "Dad?" "Yeah." "If the shadows come back—" "They might," he said honestly. "You'll hear them first?" He knelt and met her eyes. "Always." She seemed to think that over, then nodded once, satisfied. The bus arrived on time. Audrey ran this time, not scanning, not measuring distance, just running. She climbed the steps and waved through the glass. Michael waved back. When the bus disappeared, he stayed a moment longer than necessary, breathing in the quiet that followed. Not empty, earned. Inside the house, he moved through the familiar motions, rinsed mugs, straightened chairs, set the coffee maker for the next morning. The routine remained, but it no longer carried the weight of vigilance alone. It carried intention. He drove to work after, back to St. Jude's, back into the rhythm of vitals and monitors, and controlled chaos. He performed with the same precision he always had. But something fundamental had changed. He was no longer bracing for intrusion. During lunch, he opened his phone and scheduled a meeting with Northwood's billing department, not to negotiate the impossible, but to plan. Phased care, adjusted timelines, support structures that didn't demand sacrifice disguised as heroism. That evening, Audrey sat at the kitchen table drawing. "What's that?" Michael asked. "A house," she said, "with thick walls." He smiled. "Looks sturdy." She added a window, then another. "So light can come in." Later, during story time, she chose a different book. One about a girl who planted a garden in a place everyone said nothing would grow. Michael read slowly, letting the words settle. After she fell asleep, he stood in the hallway for a long time, listening. Not for danger, for presence. He didn't check the utility closet. He didn't think about the Pelican case. Some doors stayed closed not because they were locked, but because they were no longer needed. In the quiet, Michael understood something Lily had known long before he did. That protection wasn't about building higher walls. It was about teaching the world, slowly, stubbornly, where it was no longer welcome. The past didn't vanish. It never did. But it loosened its grip. At 4:30 the next morning, the coffee brewed again. Audrey slept through it this time. Michael sat alone at the table, hands wrapped around the mug, and watched the light arrive. The routine held. Not because it was rigid, but because it was alive. And for the first time in a long while, Michael Vance wasn't guarding the line between danger and safety. He was standing on the side of life, steady, present, and finally at rest.